And yeah, I'm calling from São Paulo in Brazil. So welcome. Thank you for having me, and I hope we have a great talk on BI migrations.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to chat all things BI and BI migrations. And before we get started, I'd love to, if you could share your background with Indicium. I know you're the chief data officer as well as one of the co-founders there, but would love to hear it from you on kind of the origin story and where Indicium's at today.
Yeah, sure. Well, we are a global data company. We work mostly in Americas. We Our headquarters is in New York City. We have offices here in Brazil. Um, we work with all the layers in data, so from strategy to upskilling and training. So you go all the way, but mostly on platform building, services, migrations, and really helping our clients build their own data-driven culture and data-driven maturity through all the different layers of and I'd say different ways you need to build your company when you want to really use data in getting value from it. So we have been working for about 7 years on this, and we are major partners with most of the modern data stack platforms and companies, and also with data logs.
Okay, very nice. And the origin story behind it. So I know you're one of the co-founders there. I would love to learn kind of that starting point. What did that look like for you all?
Yeah, sure. So we started in a bit different way. So I think, like, as most companies, we had to, like, we did some pivots on the way. So when we started, we really want to help companies make better decisions with data. In 2017, AI wasn't the big thing back then, but there was a lot of big data. Big data was the, let's say, the AI, the hype of the time. Many of the tools we have now, many of the problems we have now were already there for people that are older in this market. So BI and organizing data management, everything was already there. And we saw that a lot of the companies were saying that they couldn't use data. They were still doing a lot of I think, I guess. And we saw that the market had a lot of big, like, good companies, like companies that would provide all kinds of data. And the question we were asking ourselves is, if there's so much data and so many, like, really good companies working with providing that data to the other companies, why are they still not doing the decisions, not being data driven? So we started really asking those questions, me and my co-founders, and we found out at the start that it wasn't really just using technology. There was a lot of processes, a lot of training, and so it was much larger than technology. That's why companies couldn't just hire some kind of tool. And we started building a consultancy and working with all these layers on people and management and technology. And we started 7 years ago, and now we have around 300 people working with us, and companies from mid-sized companies to large enterprises all over the Americas.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, thanks for walking me through that. It's funny, we started, I think, with a similar kind of realization in the market, is that everyone's buying all these technologies, adding in all these reports, dashboards, different analytics, data products, but that value measurement, there still seemed to be a gap. And I guess we approached it from a different angle, I guess about 5 years ago, our kind of starting kind of very, very early product, but with, I think, that same thesis and hypothesis that, hey, rather than adding more tooling, there's a better way to do things in terms of consolidation, running efficiently, effectively in these environments. And I know today the topic that we're planning on discussing was primarily BI migrations. So as a starting point, I'm curious what you're seeing in the market today in terms of migrations, and then I can share some of the same on what we're seeing.
Sure. Yeah, I think as usual in the data space, especially when you talk about large enterprises, there are always migrations. They're always migrating something, either the SAP or the ERP, they're migrating their data warehousing or their cloud infrastructure, or they're migrating their BI tools. So there's always something being migrated. Usually not a lot of the times it's not a technical decision, it's business decision, right? So maybe the CEO has a better terms with one of the cloud vendors or one of the BI tools. So it's something that is part of life. I think it's always going to be there, and it's we see a lot of that here in Brazil or in the US or anywhere we are working. And I think like what we can see, what can I say is what I can say is a pattern between all of those migrations, that I would say like not any of those companies, none of those companies is ready for migrations. They are not planning correctly, and they're not building their platforms or their tooling or the processes really thinking that there's going to be a migration 2 or 3 years or 5 years. And this is probably the biggest problem when we start with migrations, is because things are not ready for migration. There's a lot of work we have to do all the time, and it's a kind of work that companies don't really like, because I would say it's not really a value enabler. You don't enable a lot of value. You don't get a lot of value just with the migration, right? You need something like done, and you stop your work to work in a migration. And this is something that usually the business users don't like, the platform or the IT teams don't like. So it's a challenge. It's part of life, and I think companies are not really well prepared for that.
Right. Yeah, and that's I guess similar to what we're seeing, is that there's so many initiatives around migrations, and like you said, it's just, I think, a given that change is always going to be happening, whether it's moving to a better solution, or maybe it's just, hey, this is actually going to save cost, but the actual kind of application on the business side is going to be similar and the same. But I think the trend that we're seeing at Data Logs, and this might be just where we're sitting on terms of multiple integrations with different BI platforms, but there seems to be like at almost every large enterprise, a push for consolidation of tools, where different business owners have owned different BI platforms over time. Maybe marketing's on Looker, engineering's using Metabase, some people implemented Sigma on top of Snowflake. Then you have a Power BI environment that's growing like crazy because everyone had it on their desktop, and someone else bought Tableau. So how do you go from that kind of siloed BI ecosystem across an organization? We were actually on a call a few weeks ago where a company said they had 35 different BI tools. And like, I'm in the BI space, and I don't think I can name more than 10 tools myself. But there seems to be like this natural point of, we've bought so many tools over time, and let's put a mirror up to ourselves, and how do we have 2, 3, 4, 5 enterprise tools instead of these different silos all over the organization? And yeah, so likewise, we're seeing something similar in the market there, but I think migration's always happening, and then there seems to be kind of a critical point right now of consolidation with the enterprises. And I'm curious, you talked a little bit about kind of best practices in terms of migration. A lot of organizations are struggling to do that. So what does best practice look like from Indicium's point of view? If, hey, we have BI system A, we want to move to BI system B, we think it's going to take 3 years. How would you go in and make it say, hey, 6 months, better value, we're getting it done faster, and a better result?
Sure. I think definitely BI migrations are part of a larger problem, which is governance. Like, let's say like infrastructure governance or data governance in general. So like you said, like when we talk to the enterprises, they're using a whole different BI tools, but they may also be using different data warehouses and different ingestion tools and different transformation frameworks. So there's a lot of consolidation in all of that, not only in BI. So companies are trying to make their infrastructure more cost effective, more that makes more sense on a whole strategy. But when we see the migrations in the BI space, I think there are the two kinds of migration. I would say one is just when you're migrating your BI tool itself. So maybe from Tableau to Power BI, from Power BI to Looker, or something like that. And there's also migrations when you are actually migrating something behind the BI tool, such like the data warehouse, and then you need to migrate all your objects or your connections, your data sources. And both of these migrations are very hard to do and complex, right? I think the first best practice that we see is, first is not trying to do a big bang approach, like not trying to do everything at once. It's usually really hard. It takes time. And when you finish, there's going to be a whole lot of new objects in the old BI tool, because no business team is going to wait 3 years for you in a freeze mode, right? So they will be building new stuff. So I would definitely recommend doing waves and doing in a more business domain approach, not in a, let's say, big bang approach. But probably before this is really rationalizing what you have on your infrastructure. There's a lot of garbage out there, right? We're doing a migration just now, and we mapped about 800, 1,000 objects in a BI tool, and that was already filtered. There was a talk with the business, what do you usually need, and they cancel a lot of the workspaces, and it was a Power BI migration. And out of that 1,000 dashboards, only 10% was actually updated. So we were our first filter, we just found that 90% of the objects were not updated for months. So do we need to migrate something that is not updated from the last 4 or 6 months? Probably not. There's not a lot of value on that, right? So I think this is one of the also best practice. You need to do a very good inventory of what you need to migrate. What's the value in migrating? Because when you migrate, especially when you're using a partner like Indicium, you're gonna pay for it, right? So how much value you're getting from each object, and how much cost is gonna take you to migrate to another tool. I think these are the two first best practices I would recommend. And I think I'll get back to you, Logan, because I'll be talking best practice for an hour here if I keep on.
Okay. Yeah. We're, I guess, kind of full alignment there on, I think everyone knows you don't want to just pick up, lift, and shift to the new environment. And like you said, it's beyond just the visualization. A lot of the complexity is actually coming from the data itself. And what we see all the time at Data Logs is you have all this logic that's been built over years living in the BI tool itself, when in reality, the best practice may be, hey, rather than having these 40 different Tableau prep jobs that are all doing similar things, let's just build an endorsed view in Snowflake and say, hey, this is a gold standard. We're going to then use that one data source and prevent doing the lift and shift with 40 different individual jobs between BI tools. And so identifying some of those pieces, and I feel like, a big chunk of it lives in the data side. There's a lot of logic probably floating around BI that doesn't need to be there. And we approach it in a similar way where we really we call it a BI assessment. But on the environment, let's figure out where are the most complicated things running today? Where's the most complicated logic in the BI tools? How can these be simplified? Then start looking into reusability from a metrics, semantics perspective, but also on the data set level. Like if we've seen the same CSV is going into Power BI 40 times, well, that probably should be a reference table and does not need to be a CSV being emailed around departments that's out of date for every different person who uses it. And then beyond that reusability, then you got to start thinking about dependencies. So if we move object A, then object B is that next flow, and what is the actual order? And we've designed a lot of our kind of latest migration assessment features around those questions that you were mentioning of, hey, we need to figure out reusability, dependencies, those problems within the BI world itself before we actually start moving. And I don't know if you've seen any kind of metrics from your side in terms of time to migration with best practices and without, or any examples you can share there.
Yeah, you make a good point there. I think that BI, when you talk about BI, most companies don't really understand what's the point of BI at first. Like, why are you building a BI to a dashboard. Uh, I think like a lot of the value is looking into as a data product, right? So you need it's a product. You have a, let's say, a product time life cycle, and you build it. Sometimes that makes no sense anymore. You deprecate it, and there's because dashboards are expensive, right? So you need a pipeline to fulfill that data. You're usually querying a lot of data in, let's say, in Snowflake or in Databricks or any kind of data warehouse tool. That takes there's a cost there. A lot of the business users don't see, or they don't care. But it's different from spreadsheets, and I think most of the companies still see BI as just a, let's say, advanced dynamic table, right? So okay, we have spreadsheets, we can do that in BI, but it's much harder in BI. Like, you need better governance, you need better practices, you need to understand what should be in the dashboard and what should be in the data warehouse. And most companies they haven't asked those questions internally before building it. So that's why they have this Frankenstein of a visualization layer with all these tools, no management, no governance. So it's pretty hard to do. Actually, most of this, I'll say there's a problem with the tooling space also, because it's not easy to do good governance in Power BI or Tableau. And these tools, they need something like data logs so you can actually understand what's happening, right? It's not out of the box, and it's not, and also it's not IT driven a lot of the times, right? It's business driven. So a lot of the IT governance practice and management practice that you need for these kind of products, like you would need for a ERP or for any other product that is technology driven, it's not there, because it's not the IT department is not really looking into BI. It's just serving the data. Like you use it. But when you do a migration, you need to do kind of like an IT project. Like usually the IT is called upon, like, okay, we need to migrate Tableau to Power BI. Then you go there and you see there are thousands of Tableau preps that nobody knows how it works. You have to open each box. There's no like really good way of like automatically migrating. It's a very like a manual work. So I think probably the when we talk about metrics, the first one is if you don't rationalize, if you don't look in what's being used. I just said a few minutes ago, like you would probably do 10 to 15 times the work because you're be migrating things that no one is using. So this is probably the worst part, right? Also, you need to find accelerators. Maybe if you're talking about Power BI, maybe it's on the data flows. You would be like, you can do some parts of it you can do by APIs or automatically migrate the data sources. You can build the new workspaces with scripts and APIs. Unfortunately, there's a lot of manual work also. You'll be there, you have to there's parts of the migration that you have to do manually. You have to go there in a Power Query or something like that and change the names. But if you have a good process, even let's say a table that has a from and to comparison between the legacy and the future, you can already start having some like gains in productivity, right? Some other BI tools such as Tableau and Looker, sometimes they have better metadata, they have better scripts that you can also do some. You can automatically accelerate a lot of the work. So I think one of the best practices is really doing one, right? Before you just do the whole migration, you need to create your own framework for a BI migration. And it's going to be different for each company. The way each company, because the BI tools are so flexible in the ways they source data, in the ways they have their semantic layers and all of that. So you would have to build your own like small framework of how to migrate, and then find the accelerators, find like exactly what you need to migrate, and start from that. Like you accelerate and you scale your migration like with small teams, and then each team starts with the same process. And I think that's something we are doing a lot of our migrations, and it's definitely helping on the costs and the timelines.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like you bring up a great point there of everyone's configured BI in a slightly different way. And I think it's grown very organically over time. So what company A may be doing, it may not match what company B is doing. And you mentioned BI governance, which of course at Data Log, that's one of our favorite buzzwords of, hey, you got to add guardrails, governance to the BI layer, not just your data. Because as soon as it hits BI, you have that same risk. There's more transformations occurring, more people adding in new static files, random data sources coming from things you probably didn't even realize were floating around your organization. But you need those same guardrails in place. But I'm curious, that BI governance, what does that mean to you and at Indicium?
Yeah, well, I think it's very similar to what we say about data governance, right? When we're talking about the whole platform, it's like what kind of data we have, what are the sources, who is the owner of each data object, data asset, what's the life cycle of that data, if it's being updated or not, if it's a legacy transformation, all the questions about PII data, who should have access to each kind of data. So it's something that is very hard to do in the BI tools, right? So we see of companies that have like a very complex governance process in the data warehouse, and they just give the data to the BI tool and anyone can access all the data. So it's like you lose everything because, like I said, sometimes the IT department is not there, so they don't really care what's like. No, we did our job, and then I'm gonna send this data to finance, and they can use all. They're gonna be like, yeah, but I need access to this data, and okay, I'll just give you to the BI tool, and you do it, and then everyone has access to all the data. We see that a lot in BI tools. So I think like BI governance, parts of it is really data governance. So you need to see the data that was in the data warehouse or the data lake or anywhere before. You should have a similar structure in the BI layer or the visualization layer. And there's also a governance about the objects itself, right? So dashboards, reports, models, semantic models. So who is the owner of each object? Like, is it endorsed by the organization? Is it a sandbox that no one is updating? And a lot of that is not being well done. So sometimes you have something that I also see, and I think most of the listeners will relate to this, is you do a migration, and you're like, okay, we have 1,000 prod objects, let's say. So this is in the prod workspaces. And then you start the migration, or you're finalizing the migration, and the business comes say like, no, we can't stop using the other tool because we have these 300 objects that are in the sandbox workspace, and the CEO sees it every day. So like, how can he see something that is in the sandbox workspace? Because there's a lot of that. Like, there's not a lot of governance on the, like, how you move from layers from dev to QA to prod. A lot of the software things that we are used to is simply not there in the BI layers and the BI tools. And this is also parts of governance, right? So you would have governance about data, and you need governance about the objects in the BI tool, which is something different from the data warehousing world.
Right. Yeah, no joke. I literally saw a capacity in Power BI named Test Do Not Use, and it was the highest used capacity within that company. And it was like, okay, how'd this happen? I guess the users don't see it, and the links probably just forwarded around and organically grew over time. But then your quote unquote QA test environment is now basically production, and no one's using production, and the teams doing the development, like, there's a good chance they didn't even realize that in reality that was actually happening. And I feel like there's so many of these little problems that just kind of add up in the BI world. And I think, I guess over the last 5 years, maybe you've heard differently, but I feel like there's this big push for, hey, we need to be extremely data literate. We want everyone in the organization creating reports, dashboards, using data. And then now we're at a point where you can access data almost instantly in Databricks, Snowflake, cloud tools. And BI just naturally has become the biggest access point of data, but it's lacking that guardrails, controls in place. And I mean, some of the BI tools have add-ons or the Tableau management feature, and there's some in Power BI where you can restrict controls. but how you do it in a way that's still enabling people to interact with data as they want, but just someone in the background as a mini kind of BI police. And that's how we think about ourselves is, hey, let's stop that bad behavior and be the maid and the police cleaning and enforcing policy and rules.
Yeah, definitely we need the BI police in a few companies, I think. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think this is a very good point. I think that maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago, the access points for data was building software, right? So you would need a ERP, you would need a custom project, a custom app that you would hire a company to build, or your IT department would build. And that, of course, that would take time, right, and money to build it, but it was controlled, right? There was a very good control, governance, like you would have strict access controls and everything was planned. You would have feature design. And when you think about self-service BI or self-service data teams, the first point of contact is usually the BI tool. So you would say like, no, now I need people just like doing their slicing and dicing and just joining data. And I don't want to be like planning for all the possible features. I want to have them really looking into the data and just making better decisions. And it's challenging. I think that's really probably the way it is. It has to go that way. So you need people, the companies being data driven, but there are so many use cases that are appearing that maybe the companies, the teams, the users, they don't have the literacy, they don't have the training to do it. And I'm going to tell you a very interesting use case I saw in a client a few weeks ago. Is that they want to migrate, they want to use the BI, or they use the BI as a way to answer customer requests. So they have a customer service team, and they have that data in the data warehouse. And when there's a service request, they need to export, let's say, a CSV file and show and tell the client, like, this is how you use the service or product, and this is the cost. And they don't have that easily in their systems. So they have, like I say, a dashboard that they can kind of dynamically add filters to, the main product of the dashboard is having a filter table that they download the CSV file and send to the customer in a WhatsApp or email. Yeah. So you see, this is not really what you were planning for when you're building a dashboard in Power BI, right? So it's a data access tool. It's a query engine. It's not really, they're using BI as a query engine, not as a reporting service. But then when you have this kind of service, like, who should have access to which kind of data, like to each client? Right? If you're having a SAP or ERP system, that would be like well designed. But if you're doing that in a BI tool, you would have to have some kind of role level security. You would need to have a really good understanding of which client each service analyst could see. How can you talk the same permissions from the BI tool to the data warehouse? Because you need to be having a mapping there, right? Because usually on the BI tool, you have a service account. So you don't have, each user doesn't have their own user. That happens on the database. So it's very challenging, right? So, because there are so many different use cases. And when you open like the box, let's say the Pandora box, let's say like now you have all this data and it's hard to close. It's hard to tell the users, no, you're restricted on this, you're restricted on that. And I think this is it's a part of the problem when we're talking about BI governance and BI migrations in general. It's like a lot of those boxes were open before building the guardrails, before having the processes, and before having the right training, so these users can do it properly and in a governed way. So, and now we're trying to kind of fix it with the plane flying. So that's a big challenge.
Right. Yeah, and those use cases of using BI for, I think, beyond the original intention, I think it's great for the data world that there's so much flexibility. It's enabling as a tool. But like you said, it's how do you add kind of just additional controls in place to make it successful. And Daniel, I just want to thank you. I think that's about all the time we have today for the podcast. I really appreciate you coming on and being willing to chat through BI migrations, governance, and some recent things you've worked through with the team. And yeah, really excited for Data Logs and Indicium to continue to work together and see each other grow over the next few years.
Oh, thanks for having me, and it was really great chatting about this. I think it was probably the first time. I'm always talking about data in data warehousing and AI, but I think it was the first time I'm talking about BI itself. It's something I really like, and I think there's a big challenge that most companies are not seeing properly. And I hope you can join some other time and talk a little bit more about BI or any other data-related challenges that we can work together.
Yeah, definitely. Would love to. Awesome. Thank you, Daniel.